Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Culture Watch podcast. You know, if you've been listening for any length of time, that this podcast is an outreach of Speaking for Him Ministries, and I am so glad that you are here to join us today. The reason that Culture Watch exists is because at Speaking for Him, I believe that it is important for us to look at current events and news items from a Christian perspective, because we are called to be in the world, but not of the world. We are never called out of the world, and we are called to make an impact while we are here. Jesus says to be salt and light. And so I'm really glad that you've chosen to spend some time with me today. And I hope that if this podcast is a blessing to you, that you will share it with your family and friends. That's how more people find out what we are doing here at Speaking for Him. With that being said, let's jump into news for the week of July 13. So as we open the show today, I would like to put a spotlight on our veterans.
As we saw, Americans didn't let a little rain ruin their Independence Day celebrations. But did you see that 103-year-old World War II veteran who wanted to display his patriotism?
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above.
President Trump has made protecting veterans a key part of his administration, scoring some big wins for America's heroes on health care and housing. This includes signing an executive order to transform the West Los Angeles VA Medical Center campus into the VA Center for Warrior Independence, which is meant to combat veteran homelessness. Joining us now for tonight's big close-up is Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins. Secretary, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you. First of all, I don't know if you were in D.C., if you got a chance to see the Georgia display there, but they were bragging on onions, so I made my co-host here eat one, and we enjoyed it. So I know you know about those Vidalias.
You better believe, hey, Vidalia is the only one. Now, no offense to my Texas brothers and sisters, but Vidalia is the sweet onion.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, listen, you know, I've got a million questions for you as I always do, but I have some fantastic co-hosts here, so we'll stick with the homelessness problem. It's my belief that veterans' homelessness is solved at the Department of War, not the Department of Veterans Affairs. If they're already homeless, if they're under your domain, then a lot of failures have happened before they got there. Is that do you share in that belief? And if so, are you working with the Department of War on exit of the military so that doesn't become the problem?
Well, Joy, you've hit on a great issue that we really need to discuss, and I think this is the first administration actually to have a Secretary of War and a Secretary of VA actually work together. In fact, I was told when Pete came over last year to sign a memorandum of understanding on some issues that we were doing, it was the first time a Secretary of War had ever actually been in the VA building. And that should have never happened. VA is dependent, just like the the War Department is dependent on us. We're dependent on them. We're fraternal twins. So it really takes this transition period and says, as you're coming out, are we giving you the tools to cope with life outside the military? Are we getting you the skills? Are we getting you the training? Are we getting you the medical help? Are we getting you the things you need? And so I think it's a combination of both of us coming together to say, how do we make this work? But then you're going to have some who get through, they end up on hard times, and that's where we're coming through to make sure we're finding, you know, temporary housing and permanent housing. We permanently housed over 50,000 just last year, and we're moving through that again this year. So it is moving forward. President Trump's made a priority of this. West LA project is one of them.
I love that, Secretary. And just to kind of build off of what Joey said, you know, we talk about the homeless crisis, whether it be in the veteran community or just Americans in general. We know that you mentioned Los Angeles. They have a big problem with that just in general. And for those of us who are civilians who deeply care about veteran homelessness, but we want to know maybe a little bit more about it and a little bit more about what the VA or the Department of War can do, what is the primary challenge with veteran homelessness, getting them into that position? Is it PTSD? Is it, you know, health care issues? Is it just returning to civilian life and trying to find their bearings? And what more can people do? I know there's a lot of great charities that assist in this, Tunnel to Towers being one of them. But how can Americans who deeply care about this issue better get involved in understanding the crisis here?
Well, I think the answer to, I hate to be simplistic, but the answer to all your part of that question was yes. All of that plays into it. And that's why we have a combination with what we call a HUD voucher, which allows veterans that are homeless to get into temporary and permanent housing that we work with HUD on, but it's sort of a bifurcated system. The issue that we have, though, is when the VA comes in, we do those wraparound services that you just talked about, whether it be in mental health, whether it be in physical health. We also give counseling for job skills and also help in employment. We do have a lot of great private partners who help. Tunnels Towers, you said, is a great one. The thing that we have to do, though, and for people out there, is just look around you. There are people in your hometowns, in any hometown in this country, there is at least some homelessness. You see it all over. It's just don't turn a blind eye to it. And when you have veterans that are part of that, is getting them to help, getting them to the VA, getting them to our vet centers so that we can begin that process of helping them. The good part about it is, over the last 20 years, veteran homelessness has declined while other homelessness has went up, but we're still too far away. And these are the people who raised their right hand and said they're going to take and defend this country.
So homelessness has always been something that I've thought a lot about, especially since I worked at the Guiding Light Mission homeless shelter in Grand Rapids, Michigan, nearby where my home and studio is. And it would be nice to believe that there was a simple solution with a bow on it. And when you don't factor in the way people are, it does seem like a simple solution. Just build them homes or just get them into homes. But it's not that simple, because when I worked with the homeless community, I found that there were a number of homeless people that were simply hard up and that were willing to work hard if they were given the opportunity to work hard, and that they were out on the street through no fault of their own. And then I found a good number of homeless people who, once you talk to them for 5 minutes, you realize that they would always be homeless because they had a mindset of victimhood that they would never rise above. So I think, first of all, it's important for us to know that people are homeless for a variety of reasons, and sometimes it's their own fault, and other times it is life circumstances beyond their control. So we need to understand that when we tackle this issue, because it's not as simple as putting a roof over someone's head. Because if someone does not want to take responsibility for the roof you give them, they cannot hope to totally overcome the issue of their homelessness. That being said, I believe that veterans, more than anyone else, should be taken care of by our government. These men and women have given their all for this country, especially since we haven't had a draft in years. It's been, I don't know how many years since our armed forces have been totally voluntary, but it's been a long time. And we owe these people as much as we can give them, because they decided to write a blank check to the United States of America and say, whatever you want me to do, I will do for you. And so we should honor that. But I think it's important for us to realize that, again, it's not just about putting a roof over someone's head. It's about getting them the programs they need for help. And one of the reasons that I know this is because I myself, as a disabled person, have been, I hesitate to use the word victim, but I've been a statistic in programs. And I have personal experience that, if not done right, there can be some bad things that occur. What do I mean by that? Well, for instance, I have been in a couple different job programs to help disabled people get jobs. And one of these job programs came after I had my bachelor's degree. So the structure of the job program was to help me find work and to help motivate me to look for work myself, which I appreciated, don't get me wrong. But in the case of these job programs, they would have been very happy if I got a part-time job that was well below my educational station, and they would have checked off the box in their book and said, Andrew is successfully employed. And that was not going to roll in my book. I had that happen to me basically twice, where a job program thought that it was sufficient to find me a part-time job and consider me employed. And that is really one of the sad parts. The other sad part is that even though I was in a job program, and yes, that helped motivate me to get a job, there was actually 2 out of 3 times when I was in a job program where I essentially found the job as a part of the job program, but the person helping me find work didn't find it. I did. Now, I will admit that there was some motivation from them to look for work, so I think that did help. But none of these jobs that I found were full-time jobs that were truly commensurate to my degree, and I've actually continued to be underemployed and overeducated for the duration of my life. And one of my goals is to make this ministry of speaking for him a full-time gig. I don't want to get rich, but I would like to get to the point where I'm making a good living doing what I'm doing through the podcasts and also through my preaching. So I'll just throw a little plug in here since I'm talking about the issue, that if you have a church that would like to have me preach, or you'd be interested in giving a donation to Speaking for Him, for both of these things, you can check out my website, speakingforhim.com. That's speaking4him.com. But to get back to this story, and I'm sure the people in this segment would agree as well, one of the things we desperately need for our veterans is mental help and physical help. We need a VA that provides mental and physical help in a consummate and very swift manner, because for a long time the VA has existed but kind of limped along and not really taken the needs of our service men and women seriously. And so it does appear that the Trump administration is trying to do some really important work for the veterans of our communities. And I'll just say here, we've talked a lot about immigration on this show. And one of the things that I would say about the issue of immigration is that one of the reasons that legal immigration is important is because it slows the amount of people immigrating to this country and allows resources that would be allocated to the flood of immigrants to be allocated to actual Americans, and particularly to Americans who have served this country, who have fought for this country, and who are the reason that you and I are free. And I think this is especially applicable since we just celebrated the 250th birthday of America, that we need to give all of our accolades, all of the honor we can to the people who have done so much so that we could live in a free society. And I know that many of them will say that the true heroes are the ones that didn't come home. But for the ones that did come home, they deserve to have a great home to live in, and they deserve to be cared for. But again, unless we address some of the mental issues that these people are facing, even if you give them a nice home and resources, they're not going to know how to use them properly. So it's important for us to have the means in place to not only give someone a roof over their head, but to help them sustain the roof over their head. Because to relate it to my experience with homeless people, and this is why I brought up my experience with disability related job programs is when I was working for Guiding Light Mission, they had a program for the homeless men. They could live at the homeless shelter. I think it was for, I don't remember if it was for 6 months or a year, and potentially longer if they absolutely had to. But the idea was to find them housing and a job in that period of time so that they could leave the homeless shelter and begin a new life, an independent life, a better life, especially since ostensibly a lot of them, while they were in the shelter, detoxed from substance abuse and were making a clean break to live a great life, hopefully with God at the center. But so the components of this program were to get clean, to learn life skills, and then to get a job and get an apartment so they could live on their own. Well, I feel like a lot of these homeless people face the same problem I did, which is they were given subpar job experiences and subpar job opportunities. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is, for instance, Manpower, a local temporary agency, would hire certain highly functioning homeless men from the program, and they'd get these jobs that seemed really good, and they'd get 40 hours a week, and they'd be really excited. I have a full-time job. Now I can get an apartment. Now I can get on my own. And the problem is that the temporary agency would continue to hire people so that gradually the person who had these full-time hours would have their hours ratcheted back to part-time, and now they didn't have the foundation to succeed that they thought they did. And if they weren't quite ready to embrace the outside world and they had the pressures of what happened with their employment, they could slide back into old habits. Now, please don't get me wrong. I believe that personal responsibility is important. I talk about it a lot on this show. So ultimately, someone is responsible for how they respond to these situations. But I can understand how frustrating it would be to think that you have a job that's your ticket out of your current situation, only to find out that it was a temporary situation and it wasn't going to be sustainable. And that's really the story of my life, is that I've always been looking for what is going to be that sustainable job opportunity for myself, not to get rich, mind you, but just to be that protector and provider that I believe God has called me to be as a man. I still long to have a wife and children, even if they're someone else's children. If I marry a widow or someone who is unmarried or whatever the scenario be. So I still have that drive to become that man, even now at 47 years old. So these considerations that these homeless men had, and I'm sure the considerations of a lot of veterans who have struggled with PTSD and other things, are the same considerations that I have had as a disabled individual. We just want an adequate chance to succeed in the workforce. And so I really hope that the Trump administration succeeds in helping many of these veterans to find the housing and the job help that they need, because again, these are our heroes. These men and women are the reason that you and I can wake up in peace and safety and have the freedom to worship the way we do, and the freedom to believe as we do, and most importantly, the freedom to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And I'm so thankful to live in the great country of the US of A, and for the freedom that it gives me to tell others about the life-changing work of Jesus Christ on the cross. Well, as we move into the next story, it's hard to believe that it has been 10 months, roughly, since Charlie Kirk was taken from us with an assassin's bullet, and we are getting into the preliminary hearings for the murder trial of his accused killer.
Day 2 of a key hearing to lay out the evidence against Charlie Kirk's accused killer about to get underway in Utah. After Kirk's widow, Erica, and his family came face to face with him for the first time yesterday. We're expecting her back in court at the top of the hour as well. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino.
Morning to you. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning at home. Graphic testimony, as you can well understand. And disturbing video on day 1. It's a 5-day preliminary hearing. It's going to happen every day this week. Erica Kirk deciding to leave the courtroom to avoid watching videos of her husband's horrific murder. When at least 2 of those videos were shown, there were only certain people who watched that, including the judge and the witness and the lawyers. A former campus police officer giving testimony about video that shows a person getting into position on the roof and taking a shot, and then after that shot was fired, running away.
That same officer then describes what he found after rushing up 4 flights of stairs onto the rooftop.
To me, when I got up there and I could see this disturbance in the gravel, to me it looks like a sniper pad, a person that has been laying in a prone position, and you've got markings of elbows, knees, and feet to where somebody was in the line of sight of where Charlie's tent was.
Copy. So criminal defense attorney Josh Ritter's now here, Fox News contributor outside the courthouse in Provo, Utah. Top line message from you, Josh, about what you heard on day 1.
Well, I'll tell you what, it set the tone for how quickly, or rather how not so quickly, this prelim is going to proceed. We're seeing that the defense is really fighting every single piece of evidence that comes in. For every video that they wanted marked by the prosecution as an exhibit, for every picture that the prosecution tried to mark as an exhibit, the defense would stand up and launch several objections, which the judge would have a miniature hearing on. So it made for a very laborious day to hear some of this evidence admitted. But we did get some significant information. One was that sniper pad that was described by one of the officers, where you could literally see where they alleged that Tyler Robinson was positioning himself before taking that shot. Some other pieces of information about just kind of the atmospherics on the day at the campus and how people reacted. Some other pieces of video and some photographs. But today we're hoping to get to more of the information that has to do with Robinson himself, text messages, the letter that he left behind, comments that he made to his roommate.
I want to play a little bit more from the lead state investigator who spoke yesterday about the first priority and the large volume there.
It kind of became organized chaos, but we did have a plan, and our priority was determining whether we had an ability or a way to be able to identify who had been involved in the shooting. We were getting a large volume of information from the general public, phone tips, people sending videos. Analysts were scrolling through social media and social sites as people were posting information onto the internet. So there was a lot of information coming in.
It's a very modern investigation because you have all sorts of different viewpoints. And I read that when the video was shown in the courtroom that the judge himself winced at it. And I'm wondering if we have any information. Did Tyler Robinson have any reaction to that video being played?
You know, the way that the cameras are positioned, you cannot see his face. You're looking at the back of his head for most of the day. But from speaking to some of the reporters that we had inside of the courtroom, he's rather expressionless. We remember times before when he's been in court, he's been seen smiling, even laughing with his attorneys. So far, at least yesterday, he's been almost without reaction to much of the testimony in court.
So I remember September 10th of last year like it was yesterday, because it shook me to no end. And here's the biggest reason why it shook me. Actually, I have 2. The first reason is because I watched videos of Charlie in the days leading up to this Utah campus summit that he often has with college students. And he actually said, I've gotten death threats. I know that people are trying to take me out, but I'm going to go anyway because I can't be scared away from this. So it was very surreal when my brother Simon, I don't know if he called my dad or if he texted my dad, but he said Charlie Kirk has been shot. And of course, the first thing I do is go to Google and confirm if it's true, mainly because there's a lot of headlines that come out that aren't true. And so whenever I see something pop up, even on Facebook, I always go to Google and I figure if it says it in 5 or 6 places, then it's probably true. And time began to crawl after that happened. The irony of this is that it was the day before the anniversary of 9/11, but it was a very similar feeling for me because time stopped for a good hour, hour and a half. And it made me think about, why do I do what I do? Because I know I didn't have the reach of Charlie Kirk, but the first time I heard a clip of audio from Charlie Kirk, he was defending life. He was talking about how important it was to be pro-life and to stand for life no matter what. And as I continued to watch Charlie, I heard him talk more and more about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that was something that was so important to him. And I heard a pastor friend say after he died that he was feeling the pull to transition a little bit more away from politics and a little bit more into the preaching side of things, because his relationship with Jesus was so important that he wanted other people to embrace it. And I remember in the few days after it happened, I just felt so deflated. And there was a brief moment in time during this period where I was like, do I just stop? Especially doing the Culture Watch podcast, because I feel like on the Culture Watch podcast, I do a lot of what Charlie Kirk used to do, because I take modern news stories and I evaluate them on the basis of scripture, and I discuss them, and I hope that I give you things to think about. And after keeping my head down for a little while, I was like, you know what? This is what the devil wants. The devil wants me to look at Charlie Kirk and see myself and decide not to do this anymore. And I can't do that. That's why the Culture Watch podcast exists, because there was a time in the life of the podcast where it was like people really didn't appreciate my news commentary. And so it was either take it off the podcast and quit doing it entirely, or split it into another podcast and keep doing it. And ultimately, my conclusion was, I can't stop talking about current events and news items from a Christian perspective. I have to keep doing it. It was the 2020 lockdowns and Black Lives Matter riots that showed me the need to shed light onto the news scene. And yes, politics as well, but primarily just looking at the news from a Christian perspective. But then as a part of that, realizing that all news and politics has moral implications. And so if you can't look at it from a biblical perspective, then we're all in trouble. So when I think about this hearing, I am deeply praying for Charlie Kirk's family, for Erica Kirk, and I'm praying for Tyler Robinson's family too. Let's not get this wrong. They're struggling as well. They lost a son, even though he's not dead, in a very real way. And here's the deal. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories. I know there's a lot of people that say there's no way he did it, or people say that he didn't do it alone. And here's my take. What we know for sure is that Charlie Kirk was talking to students on campus in Utah, and that he was shot in the neck, and that it was broadcast on the internet, and millions of people have seen it happen. So we can't deny that. We also have credible evidence to believe that Tyler Robinson wanted Charlie Kirk dead, and that he took a shot at Charlie Kirk at this event. So I do believe Tyler Robinson is guilty, but I also believe there could have been a greater conspiracy afoot. Now, I have not spent time trying to decide what I think this conspiracy is, because I don't think it's that important. Because the bottom line is that Charlie Kirk, a godly man who never shied away from the truth, was taken from his wife and his children and from his community, from doing what he loved for this country, because someone had so much hate in their heart that the only thing they could do was to gun him down. And this is something that I've said over and over and over on this show, because everybody says that Trump is Hitler, that Trump is a hater, that Trump is evil and vile. But I have never hated anyone on the opposing side of the aisle more than the people who hate Trump. And this is what has always dumbfounded me. Like, people who absolutely detest him spend way more time thinking about him even than I do, and he's my president. I've said this before. When he ran in 2016, I did not think he was the best man for the job, and I did not vote for him in the primary. And I did not vote for him in the primary in 2024. I voted it for him in 2020 because I thought he did an admirable job in his first term. To be perfectly honest, I thought he was going to be politically moderate and really make us conservatives uncomfortable, and I thought that liberals were actually going to be pretty okay with him. But he decided to be true to what he promised conservatives, and he did an admirable job. But even after 2020, when he came back to run again, I was hoping that someone else would win the nomination. Did I choose him after he got the nomination? Yes. Because I thought he was the best of the two who were running. But I never have thought that he was the greatest. I've never thought that he was an insurmountable example of humanity, or that he was more than humanity. But I also never wanted anything wicked to happen to Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Bill or Hillary Clinton. I have never wanted any of these politicians, to which I am diametrically opposed politically, to suffer anything bad. As a matter of fact, I want them to stay alive long enough to bow the knee to the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, many of them probably will not, but that's still what I hope, because he is the only hope for the entire world, no matter who you are, rich or poor, young or old. Bottom line, period, in the boldest way possible. So anyway, what we're talking about when we talk about Charlie Kirk is someone who stood for truth and made those who love sin so uncomfortable that they had to take him out. And it's so ironic to me that the side who talks about love and tolerance is actually very violent and very angry. That's, I think, the way I would characterize it more than anything else, is just unmitigated anger. Like, I totally cannot imagine being in a situation where you wake up on a daily basis and your sole consideration is, what can I be mad about today? Like, that makes no sense to me. But I really do hope that things go well. If there's more of a conspiracy that needs to come out, I do hope that that comes out, because I hope that all the right people come to justice. But I think the evidence is in place for Tyler Robinson to be held culpable for this crime. And I pray above all that justice be served. If something else has to come to light, let it come to light. But the bottom line is, I don't think anyone on the right should show the level of aggression to anyone on the left that was shown to Charlie Kirk. Killing someone because you disagree with them is an awful thing to do. And it's been years since we've heard of one, but for a while, it feels like in the 90s especially, there was the occasional abortion clinic bombing from someone who claimed to be conservative and pro-life and were just stopping abortions. And I understand the motivation, but I totally do not believe that bombing a building, even if it is a building where atrocities occur, is the right way to go as an individual. Now, if you're going to talk about, do governments have the right and responsibility to do this at times in a war situation, I think that's totally different. But as an individual, it is not a good thing to vigilante that kind of thing and decide, because evil takes place in the walls of this place, I'm just going to take it out. That's not our place. So I am so grateful that Charlie Kirk stood for truth, and I pray that his family finds peace and closure through this trial, even though they will hurt and miss him for the rest of the time that they are alive. But I'm assured of the fact that Charlie is in heaven, and I will meet him one day when we are all together with Jesus. And I'm looking forward to that, because Charlie was someone that I would have loved to have on the Speaking for Him podcast, but I just never had the opportunity. All right, well, as we end the show, you know that I try to give inspiration every single week. And since we just came off of America's 250th birthday, I thought that it would be neat to hear a perspective from a legal immigrant about how they feel about being in America and how important it is to them to respect and honor America and to revere what the American flag stands for. And I know I'm going to butcher this, but I want to share this clip from a lady by the name of Işık, Abla, and I just thought her perspective was very moving.
Happy 4th of July, America. This is very personal to me. Today is not just an Independence Day for me. Today touches the deepest place in my heart. I am a former Muslim. I am an immigrant. I know what it means to come from a place where freedom is not guaranteed. So when I see the American flag, I don't just see red, white, and blue. I see mercy. I see sacrifice. I see open doors. I see a nation that gave me the freedom to breathe, to speak, to worship, to heal, and to become who God created me to be. America gave me a voice when oppression tried to silence me. America gave me safety when fear tried to follow me. America gave me opportunity when my past tried to bury me. That is why I do not take this country for granted. Freedom is not cheap. Freedom is not casual. Freedom is not something we can celebrate one day and neglect the next. Freedom must be protected. Freedom must be prayed over. Freedom must be defended by every generation. And it is time to fight for our freedom. And I want you to hear my heart. I love this country. I am standing on the front lines for faith, family, truth, and freedom because America is worth fighting for. May God bless America with truth over confusion, unity over division, courage over fear, righteousness over compromise, healing over hatred, and revival over spiritual sleep. America, do not despair. God is still calling you to awakening. America, do not stop protecting yourself from all evil and your enemies. May freedom ring again in our nation, in our homes, and in our hearts. May our families during this time reconcile, be restored, and stand unified. Because united we stand, divided we fall. And we will never forget how much freedom means to us. God bless America, and God bless you.
Ishık, I really appreciate your message. I don't know if we will ever get a chance to speak, but folks, that is what immigration is truly all about. This is a lady that's a former Muslim. She came from an oppressed country. She came to America and she realizes what freedom is about. This is why I often say I wish that some of our young people could go over to one of these oppressed countries and see what it's like to live there and see the challenges that are there, because then they would come back to the USA and be so much more grateful for what they have there. And my hope is that we would never forget the blessings that we have in America and that we would always seek to defend them. This applies to America on a physical, earthly level, but it applies even more to our spiritual responsibility to share the truth of the living God with the next generation. The reason that Speaking for Him exists, the reason that the Speaking for Him podcast and Culture Watch podcast come out each week is because in Judges chapter 1, there arose a generation that knew not God. And when I was in college, I realized that by God's grace, I did not want to be responsible for a generation arising that knows not God. My passion in this ministry is to make sure that the next generation knows God and serves Him fully. So I hope and pray by God's grace that I am accomplishing that mission, and I would covet your prayers as I continue to seek to do that even better. So that's all I have to share with you on today's edition of the Culture Watch podcast. I just want to encourage you, if you appreciate this episode, could you give me some feedback? Either share a review on your podcast platform of choice, or send me an email or a voicemail on my blog. All that contact information will be coming up at the end of the show. I would really appreciate hearing from you. Every bit of feedback really encourages me as a content creator. I would also like your comments, questions, or concerns on how to make this show better. It would truly mean a lot to me if you would give me your opinion. I truly appreciate it. And then finally, as we wrap up today, I just wanted to point out something to you. And that is, if you go to my audio page, and you can get to it either through my main website, speakingforhim.com, speakingthenumber4him.com, or you can go to speakingforhim.sermon.net. And if you go to my audio, you can sort my audio through a variety of ways. I recommend mostly series, especially if you're talking about the podcast, because you can find any of my podcast series together in their own separate list on this search grid. And Culture Watch has its own list. So if you want to go back and listen to past episodes of Culture Watch, just find the Culture Watch list on the speakingforhim.sermon.net audio player, and that will help. Or if you ever hear a series on Speaking for Him, and you know, because of the way that I do the podcast, that I very rarely do series episodes back to back, because I like to have a variety of content. Anytime you want to go back to a particular series on Speaking for Him, you can click on the series title under the series tab and find all episodes related to that series. So I just wanted to give you that bit of housekeeping as we end here. And with everything that I have said, I just want to say to you, I hope you have a wonderful week, and that, as always, you keep serving the best of masters.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Your host has been Andrew Gomison, founder of Speaking for Him. For information on today's show and to leave us comments and voicemails, please visit Speaking for Him. That is speaking numeral for him.blogspot.com. You can find Andrew's ministry at speakingforhim.com. That's speaking the number 4 HIM.com. And when you look for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or all other major podcast platforms, let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving a rating and a review. Intro music for this podcast is provided by Audio Kraken. Transition music is provided by Superstate. Both of these tracks are available free of charge from pond5.com, pond5.com.